is a kind of seeing that goes beyond the eyes, a kind of clarity that does not rely on light, shape, or color. It cannot be taught in classrooms, it is not learned from books, and it cannot be captured by logic or language. Vision. This deeper sight is not about what is in front of you. It is about what is within you. Most people walk through life with their eyes wide open yet deeply blind. Blind to their habits, blind to their patterns, blind to the choices that lead them into the same places of doubt, fear, and failure again and again. They see objects. They see distractions, but they do not see themselves. This is not their fault. It is how the world trains us to chase what is outside, to respond to appearances, to live as if everything real exists only in what can be touched or measured. But the real transformation in life does not happen out there. It happens when you see clearly within, when your inner sight is awakened. There is a technique for this. It has been hidden, not because it is secret, but because it is difficult. Not because it is forbidden by others, but because most forbid themselves from going deep enough to access it. To use this technique, you do not need talent. You do not need status. You only need the willingness to confront what is real and the courage to see what you would rather avoid. And that is why so few ever unlock it. This technique begins where comfort ends. It begins when you stop using your eyes to look outward and start using your mind to look inward. It is not mystical. It is not magical. It is simple, but not easy. It is stillness, not the absence of movement. The presence of attention. You sit. You breathe. You let the world fall away. And as the external noise softens, a different noise grows louder. The inner dialogue. The voice that speaks when the lights are off and no one is watching. That voice is your entry point. It is the doorway to the technique, and what you do next determines whether you pass through it or turn away again. You observe without judgment, without flinching. Every impulse, every fear, every old emotion that you've buried with distractions and busyness, it all comes up. The mind tries to fight it. It brings thoughts. It brings memories. It tries to lead you back into distraction. But you do not move. You stay. In that staying, something begins to change. You begin to see how your reactions have shaped your life, how your fears have limited your path. You begin to see your patterns, the cycles you repeat, the habits that betray your highest self. You see them not as abstract ideas, but as living energies inside your body. Tension in your chest, tightness in your stomach, heat behind your eyes. They speak if you learn how to listen. Is not the kind of vision others will notice. It will not glow. It will not shine. But you will know. Because with this vision, you will no longer walk into situations blindly. You will no longer act out of reaction. You will no longer mistake emotion for truth. You begin to sense intention, energy, direction. You begin to feel when something is off before it happens. You begin to choose differently, not out of fear, but from alignment. Is vision beyond the physical, and it begins by seeing yourself with honesty. The technique is not something to practice once. It is a discipline, a daily returning to presence, a stripping away of illusion, a sharpening of the mind until it no longer wavers, no longer flees, no longer hides. It is forbidden not because it is dangerous, but because it is powerful. And anything powerful must be approached with discipline, humility, respect. This is not for the curious. It is for the committed. You do not need to believe in this. You need only to experience it. Try it once, sincerely, and the world will never look the same again. Because you will not be seeing through your eyes, you will be seeing through your being, clear, unshaken, awake. This is the vision that changes everything. The beginning of unlocking inner vision is the mastery of stillness. Stillness is not what most people believe it to be. It is not the absence of sound. It is not simply sitting without motion. Real stillness is the sharpening of attention. It is choosing to place your awareness fully in the now, undivided, undistracted. That is the first step toward vision beyond the physical. Most people cannot sit for even a few minutes without distraction. The body shifts, the thoughts wander, the emotions rise. The moment silence arrives, the mind runs, This is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of conditioning. You have been trained your entire life to escape stillness, and yet the very technique that leads to deeper clarity requires you to stay within it. To begin, you must sit, not as a formality, but as a ritual. Sit with the spine upright, the body relaxed but alert. Close the eyes, not to shut out the world, but to turn inward. Bring your attention to the breath, not to control it, to observe it. Let it flow as it wants and let your awareness rest on its rhythm. This is the first challenge the mind will fight. It will bring you images, memories, ideas, plans. It will search for something to grab. You will feel the need to react, but you must not. You remain, like a mountain unmoved by the wind. The stillness is not weakness, it is training. It is the foundation of everything that comes after. As you sit, something subtle begins to happen. You notice not only the thoughts, but their patterns. You begin to see how certain emotions are tied to certain ideas. A memory arises and immediately your body reacts. Your chest tightens, a jaw clenches, a voice inside begins its commentary. This is pointless. I can't do this. I've never been good at this. These are not random. They are the guardians of your old identity, and they do not want you to pass. You must observe them like clouds passing through the sky. No reaction, no resistance, just awareness. The more you do this, the more space you create inside. And that space is where your deeper vision begins to emerge. When the surface of a lake is turbulent, you cannot see your reflection. But when it becomes still, the reflection appears naturally. The same is true for your mind. As the noise begins to settle, you start to perceive things that were always there but hidden. Tensions in the body, suppressed emotions, unresolved thoughts. You see them not with your eyes, but with your awareness. This is inner sight, kind of seeing that requires no light, only attention. With this sight, you start to understand things not as isolated events, but as interconnected patterns. You see how your current emotions are rooted in past experiences, how your reactions are not responses to the present, but echoes of the past. You begin to witness yourself, not as a victim of thought, but as the observer behind it. This is not imagination. It is clarity. Stillness trains you to perceive subtle energy, not energy in a mystical sense, but in a practical one. You feel the pull before the emotion arises. You sense the shift in your mood before it becomes behavior. You catch the thought before it becomes speech. This is vision, and it allows you to walk through life not blind, not reactive, but precise and aware. Stillness also teaches you presence, true presence. Not simply being physically somewhere, but being fully there. When you are present, you see more. You hear beyond words. You feel beyond surfaces. You detect what others miss. And in a world full of people who are distracted, that presence becomes power. But stillness is not a one-time event. It is a practice, a discipline. Each time you return to it, you go deeper. You peel away another layer. You uncover another truth. And the deeper you go, the more clearly you see, not just the world around you, but the world within. Eventually, you will no longer sit for peace. You will sit for clarity. You will sit not to escape life, but to see it with greater precision. Because once your vision turns inward, everything outside begins to shift as well. You begin to recognize what aligns and what doesn't. Who speaks with truth and who hides behind words. What decisions are rooted in fear and which are guided by wisdom. And all of it begins with stillness. If you can master this first step, not once, but every day, you will already be seeing in a way most never will. You will begin to unlock what others believe is forbidden. Not because it's hidden from them, but because they have never trained themselves to stay still long enough to see. Once the body becomes still, the next layer begins to reveal itself, your thoughts. Thoughts are subtle. They arise before you realize it. They shape your mood, bend your posture, influence your choices, and form the invisible lens through which you see the world. But most people never truly observe their thoughts. They are too close to them, too entangled. They don't realize they're reacting, not to the present moment, but to the stories they carry inside. Is why the second part of the technique is the observation of the inner dialogue. Because unless you become aware of the voice that narrates your life, you cannot understand why you continue to repeat the same patterns. You cannot change what you cannot see. This is not about stopping the mind. That is a misunderstanding. You do not need to silence your thoughts. You need to see them clearly, impartially, with no judgment. Sit in stillness, and you will notice thoughts are never quiet for long. Even in silence, the mind speaks. It comments, compares, plans, remembers, fears. Most of the time, this narration is automatic. But now, you are not trying to stop it. You are studying it. And what you'll find may surprise you. Much of the inner dialogue is repetitive. The same phrases over and over. I should be better. This isn't working. What if I fail? The same doubts dressed in different clothes. The same fears wearing different masks. These thoughts are not facts. They are echoes, reflections of old moments, old wounds, old conditioning. But you've never paused long enough to examine them until now. As you begin observing, a space opens up. You are no longer just a thinker. You are the observer of thought. This shift is subtle, is everything. You realize that just because a thought arises doesn't mean it's true. Just because the mind says something doesn't mean you have to obey it. And in that moment, you reclaim your authority. One by one, you begin to identify the thoughts that keep you small, that make you react, that keep you looping in fear, in anger, in guilt. You notice the critical tone when you fail, the anxious voice before a decision, lazy excuses disguised as logic. You begin to track the origin of these voices. Some are yours, others are not. Some belong to people from your past. Some were created in moments of pain, but now they are not hidden. You can see them. Seeing is the beginning of liberation. With this awareness comes a new responsibility. You cannot continue speaking to yourself in the same way, knowing the cost. You cannot keep using words that damage your focus, your courage, respect. So you intervene gently, firmly. When the voice says, I can't, you pause. You ask, is that true? When the thought says, I'll never change, you respond, show you. This is not pretending. This is reconditioning. You do not replace a lie with a fantasy. You replace it with truth, a deeper truth. One that aligns with your potential, not your fear. Over time, your inner voice becomes cleaner, calmer, stronger, not because the mind becomes silent, but because the words it speaks are no longer poisoned. Now, your thoughts begin to align with your discipline. They support your decisions, sabotage your actions. And that alignment gives you energy. It gives you peace. You are no longer at war with your own mind. You are no longer walking forward while your thoughts pull you back. Is what gives rise to the deeper vision, because your perception is no longer filtered by fear. You are no longer seeing life through the eyes of someone who doubts their worth. You are seeing through clarity, through awareness, through truth. That is what makes this technique powerful. You don't just learn to observe thought, you learn to purify it. Not with force, but with honesty. Not with positivity, but with precision. Time you notice a harmful thought and replace it with something grounded, something real, you are sculpting your inner world. Thought by thought, word by word. Eventually, your mind becomes a space you can trust. A space where insight arises, not noise. Where ideas are born in stillness. Where decisions are made with calm. That is vision beyond the physical. Seeing not just with your eyes, but with a mind that is clean, clear, and conscious. Is not a one-time practice. You must return to it every day. You must sharpen it like a blade, train it like a muscle. Because the moment you stop observing, the old voice returns. And with it, the old habits, the old blindness. So you remain vigilant, watchful, aware, not to control the mind, but to understand it. And in that understanding, the technique reveals itself fully. You are no longer reacting. You are choosing. You are no longer lost in thoughts. You are leading them. And that is the beginning of true vision. Now that you have cultivated stillness in the body and awareness in the mind, the third layer of this forbidden technique begins to take shape: conscious action. For what is the point of inner vision if it does not guide the outer life? If clarity remains only in thought, it dissolves. If insight does not move through the body, it fades. To truly unlock the power of this practice, you must act. Not just any action, right action. Action that emerges from awareness, not emotion. From alignment, not reaction. This is where most people falter. They sit in silence, they observe their thoughts, and for a moment they feel calm, even wise. But then life presents a challenge, an uncomfortable conversation, a difficult task, a moment of pressure, and they revert. The fear returns, the old habits take over, and they ask themselves, why didn't my practice work? The answer is simple. Stillness gives you vision. Observation gives you clarity. But only action proves that the vision is real. You must learn to act from this deeper place. Not from urgency, not from the need to impress, but from calm and clean intention. This means doing what you know is right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. It means keeping your word to yourself, even when no one else knows. It means honoring the insight you received in stillness by expressing it in movement. There is a quiet dignity in this kind of action. It is not loud. It is not glamorous. It does not seek reward. The kind of action that comes from someone who has seen clearly, who has felt deeply, and who now moves from inner alignment, not external pressure. But how do you train this? Begin small. When you feel a wave of hesitation, stop. Return to the breath. Ask yourself, what would I do right now if I were not afraid? And then you move, you make the call, you speak the truth, you stand up, you sit down, you do the thing your fear told you to avoid. That movement, even if it is small, becomes your proof. It tells your system, I am no longer ruled by old patterns. And the more you do this, the more those old patterns lose their power. You build self-trust through repetition, through courage in motion, through doing what needs to be done without waiting to feel perfect. You see, the reason this technique is powerful is because it asks something most people avoid. It asks you to embody your clarity, not to keep it safe inside, but to risk bringing it into the world. And when you do, you will be tested. Some people will not understand. Some situations will resist your growth. Environment around you may not support the person you are becoming, but that is the point. Clarity must be tested. Insight must be challenged. Not because life is cruel, but because mastery demands it. You will only know your vision is real when you act from it, again and again under pressure. So when the mind tries to delay, you move anyway. When the emotions try to overwhelm, you return to the breath and step forward. When doubt returns, you greet it with calm and continue. This is not recklessness. This is discipline. This is living from presence. Soon, your actions begin to carry a different energy. They are no longer reactions. They are no longer desperate attempts to control or fix or please. They are precise, grounded, clean. People will feel it. They will sense the stability in your tone, the firmness in your decisions, the patience in your presence. Not because you say more, but because you speak from a deeper place. That is the mark of someone who sees beyond the surface, who moves from vision, not from noise. Level of conscious action is what makes the inner technique complete. Without it, the practice remains internal, private, theoretical. But when you begin acting in alignment with your insights, everything changes. The practice becomes real, the clarity becomes power, the vision becomes life. And that is how you begin to walk through the world differently. You don't speak of the technique. You live it, quietly, relentlessly, honestly. So do not wait. Do not let clarity stay in your mind. Move with it. Make it real. Every action taken from presence is a sharpening of your inner vision. Every step aligned with truth is a rejection of the old self. And in time, you become someone who does not just see, but who lives from what they see. That is the discipline. That is the difference. Once you have tasted stillness, observed the mind, and moved with clarity, there is one final layer that must be understood: return. The fourth and most sacred part of the technique is not something you do once, not something you finish, not something you complete and walk away from. The practice of returning. Because the mind will wander again. Distractions will come. Doubts will rise. The world will continue to test your clarity. And unless you return again and again, you will forget what you've seen. is the most difficult lesson for the modern mind. It wants newness. It wants constant novelty. It wants the next method, the next breakthrough, the next high. But real power is not in novelty. It is in repetition, staying with what works, in practicing what is simple until it becomes unshakable. Stillness is easy for one day. Awareness can come in moments. Right action can be taken once, but the one who returns daily, even when it's not exciting, even when it's uncomfortable, that is the one who unlocks vision beyond the physical. You return to the breath, not because you forgot how to breathe, but because the breath never lies, brings you back to the body. It brings you back to now. And in the breath, you find the mirror, showing you where you are distracted, where you are tense, where you are disconnected. It shows you not through words, but through sensation. This is not about control. It is about reconnection. You return to the thoughts, not to analyze them endlessly, but to observe them again, to check your inner environment. As you would not drink from a dirty glass, you learn not to drink from a poisoned mind. So you observe, you notice, you replace, and you repeat. Because the mind, like the body, collects residue. And just as you cleanse the body, you must learn to cleanse the thoughts. You return to action, especially when you don't feel like it, especially when it feels pointless. That's when the return matters most. Action done only when you're inspired is not discipline, it's convenience. And convenience does not build power. What builds power is acting from clarity, regardless of feeling. Showing up even when you are tired. Doing the work even when no one is watching. Honoring your inner insight even when the world around you is loud. This is where the real transformation happens, not in what you do once, but in what you repeat. Repetition is what carves the new path. Repetition is what changes the nervous system, strengthens the mind, and deepens your vision. You stop seeing only with your eyes. You begin to sense energy. You feel what is behind the words. You recognize patterns before they fully unfold. This is not a mystical gift. It is the reward of daily return. And sometimes you will fall. You will forget. You will break the rhythm. You will react when you meant to respond. You will allow the noise to pull you off center. This does not mean you have failed. It only means you must return. The power is not in perfection. It is in your ability to come back. Every time you return, technique becomes more deeply embedded. The pathway becomes easier to follow. Your system begins to recognize the pattern: stillness, awareness, clarity, action, return. Again and again, until it is no longer a practice. It is your way of life. Others may not notice. They may not understand what has changed. But you will. You will feel it in the way you move through the world. Not rushed, not scattered, not lost, but anchored, precise, clear. This is what it means to live with vision beyond the physical. You are no longer tossed by emotion. You are no longer a servant to impulse. You see clearly. You have trained yourself to return to what matters. Again and again, no matter how far you drift, no matter how loud the world becomes, you always return. That is the discipline. And in this return, there is peace, not the peace of passivity, but the peace of strength, the peace of someone who has faced themselves, chosen clarity, moved with purpose, and come back to it, even when it was difficult. So the final layer is not complex, not hidden, but it is rare, because most people seek the new, the extraordinary, but few are willing to return to the simple things with full presence every day. Return, and you will see clearly. Return, you will no longer need to chase clarity. It will live in you, quiet, steady, unshaken. This is how vision beyond the physical becomes your reality. Not by discovering something new, but by returning to what is eternal. You began with a question, not spoken aloud, but felt deep within: is there more than what I see? And through these past moments of stillness, observation, action, and return, you've touched the answer. Not through explanation, not through belief, but through experience, through discipline. You now know that there is a kind of vision that requires no eyes. It does not rely on light. It is not distracted by form. It is a vision that arises in stillness, sharpens in silence, but expands with presence. But to access it, you had to walk through discomfort. You had to sit unmoving as the mind tried to pull you away. You had to face yourself. Not the image you show to the world, but the raw, unfiltered inner space where truth lives. In stillness, you discovered the noise within, the racing thoughts, the tension buried in the body, the habits of escape. And yet, by choosing to stay, you made the first break from the old self. You didn't escape, you endured. You didn't resist, you observed. And with that, you began to see. Then, you turned inward toward the voice that speaks without pause. You watched how it narrates your life with fear, doubt, and repetition. But this time, you did not merge with it. You observed it. You tracked its origins. You saw the way it shaped your beliefs, your posture, your energy. And you began to intervene, not with fantasy, but with precision. Not with false confidence, but with truth. You reconditioned the inner dialogue to serve your growth instead of sabotage it. But clarity without motion is incomplete. And so you moved, not in grand gestures, but in conscious steps. You acted, not when it felt easy, but when it was necessary. You spoke the truth, honored the insight, followed through. You became someone who did not just sit in wisdom, but lived it. And with each aligned action, you proved to yourself that you are not your hesitation. You are the one who moves despite it. Yet even action must be anchored. And that's why you learn to return to the breath, to the moment, to the inner world that always speaks, if only you listen. The return is the most sacred part of the practice. It is what keeps the technique alive. No matter how clear you become, the world will test you. The mind will drift. But the one who returns, again and again, cannot be shaken for long. They do not seek perfection. They seek presence. They do not need control. Cultivate awareness. And now, the forbidden technique was never hidden. It was simply not chosen. It is not complex. It is not out of reach. But it requires sincerity. It requires commitment. Demands that you stop looking outward for answers and begin turning inward with discipline and trust. You have seen the way forward. The breath brings you back to the body. Stillness reveals the noise within. Observation sharpens the mind. Clarity purifies the voice. Action aligns the inner with the outer. And return grounds it all in truth. This is the path. Quiet, simple, powerful. Others may never understand what you've done, may never see the hours you've sat, the thoughts you've faced, the actions you've taken with trembling hands but steady heart. That's okay. This path is not about recognition. It's about awakening. And when your eyes are open, but your real vision comes from within, you walk through life differently. You feel before you are told. You see before you are shown. You respond rather than react. You know when to speak and when to remain still. You know when something is right, not because of evidence, but because your clarity says so. This is vision beyond the physical, and it is now yours. Not as a moment, but as a discipline, as a way of living, a way of seeing, a way of being. You need no permission to return. You need no teacher to remind you. The technique is within you now, and the more you live it, the more unshakable it becomes. So breathe, sit, observe, return again, and again. And one day you'll realize you no longer practice the technique. You are it.